For our viewers across Africa and the rest of the world, this is NC Continental Prime. I am Rita Omodia. We'll begin in South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa says 6 African leaders plan to travel to Russia and Ukraine as soon as is possible to help find a resolution to the war. Ramaphosa says Russia's President Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky have agreed to receive the mission and the African heads of state in both Moscow and Kyiv. He says he has held separate telephone calls with Putin and Zelensky, where he presented an initiative drawn up by Zambia, Senegal, the Republic of Congo, Uganda, Egypt, and South Africa. African countries have been badly hit by rising prices of grain and by the impact on world trade.
A group of African heads of state took the view that Africa does need to put forward an initiative, a peace initiative that could help to contribute to the solution of that conflict. And facilitated by the Brazzaville Foundation, we've been able to have these discussions. Principal to our discussions are efforts to a peaceful resolution to the devastating conflict in Ukraine, its cost on human lives, and the impact on the African continent. I presented the initiative on behalf of these countries: Zambia, Senegal, Congo, Brazzaville, Uganda, Egypt, and South Africa as well.
To discuss this further, we are joined by Opeoluwa Dapo-Thomas, an international financial analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on NC Continental Prime. Would you kindly unmute your device so that we can hear you, please?
Thank you for having me today. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Wonderful. So looking at things, 6 African leaders plan to travel to Russia and Ukraine as soon as is possible. That is the quote we are hearing from South Africa's president. And it is to help find a resolution to the war, a mission. This mission will be the latest in the flurry of so far unsuccessful diplomatic efforts to still the war. Over time, we've had Africa's non-allied or neutral stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. For you, what is your candid appraisal of this move by the African leaders?
To be frank, I don't think it would yield much success, and that is more because of, what was the worst that could happen if Russia and Ukraine don't listen to them? Because the worst has happened. Ukraine obviously has been depleted. Structurally, the country obviously is not in the same trajectory that it should be. Russia as well has lost most of its revenues. Before the war, Russia supplied about 40% of gas to Europe, and now they supply less than maybe 5%. If they even supply anything at all, they've been sanctioned on Russia. People don't want to buy Russian oil. The worst has happened, and Russia have still not retreated. So I'm very, very pessimistic about what a diplomatic mission or peace mission from African leaders would do to them. I understand the African nations' concern because, like I said, it's a dicey situation for them. They have to exhaust all options, and having a dialogue is an option because this war has actually impacted the recovery of Africa. We just recovered from COVID-19 pandemic a few years ago, and now we are on that recovery path. And then the Ukraine war actually affected it. It affected it because the war has made food prices rise, fuel prices rise. It has disrupted trade of goods and services, it has tightened the fiscal space, it has constrained green transitions, and yet also reduced the flow of developmental finance in Africa. So when you look at the impacts this has had on the African economy, and especially now you see that most of these countries now want to borrow, they have to spend more, because when all these prices go high, inflation goes up in this country, and government has a prerogative to ensure that they protect to protect their citizens. So, for example, in 2021, Kenya used to import about 30% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine. And now there's a supply disruption. Now the cost of bread will increase, and obviously that's one of the most consumed food in Kenya. Same thing happened to Cameroon. They import about 44% of their fertilizer from Russia. Now they're not importing. It's planting season. This will have an impact on crop yields and it will compromise food security. Ghana too is suffering. About 60% of Ghanaian iron ore and steel comes from Ukraine. Now that they can't import these things, it's going to have an impact on the construction industry. So this is how the the world is working. A lot of people have suffered this issue. People in Europe, people in Africa, people in Latin America, South America. So you have to ask yourself, we have to ask ourselves this question, like why are the African countries doing this? Because they actually need to, because it's actually affecting their fiscal space, it's affecting their budgets, it's affecting their livelihoods of their citizens.
Okay, Opeoluwa, quite a lot of pessimistic statements there. I mean, looking at this mission and the hope that it will be fruitful. And on the other side, we see African nations suffering a lot from this Ukraine-Russia war. But last week, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told journalists that peace negotiations were not possible at this moment, with both sides convinced that they can win. When you look at the situation between Russia and Ukraine, what do you think is responsible for this so-called non-impactful missions and the reasons why both of them are so convinced that they can actually win the war?
I mean, this war started early last year, so it's about 1 year, 5 months. I think both of them have reached a situation of no return. They think that they can pull it through. Ukraine thinks they can win. I mean, they're supplied by the US and other countries. They've been funded, they've been financed, so basically they have enough ammunition, and they think that they're in a position of defense where they can actually reduce the offense of Russia. Russia obviously has miscalculated. They thought this was going to be Crimea 2014, but now they're seeing Chernobyl in the 90s, where they're spending more time on the war. I'm sure Russia thought it was going to be like some sort of fast, quick attack, like what happened in Crimea, where they just come in and then, okay, they make their moves, they make their changes and whatnot, and they annexed Crimea in 2014. But now they've seen it's a different proposition. Their military obviously is not as I wouldn't say it's overrated, but it's not as effective and efficient as people thought. So Ukraine are thinking that we've gone this far, why should I retreat now? What's the point? We've lost everything we had. Might as well defend ourselves. And obviously, Ukraine obviously has an incentive to defend themselves, because the truth is, if you cede now, if you cede now and yield those cities to Russia, or you yield to Russia's dominance, then what says that Russia wouldn't take over the country? So you have to fight till the end. So Russia as well, like I said, they've lost a lot economically. They've lost a lot. They've lost about 10, 15 years of economic growth, because now nobody wants to do business with them. Nobody wants to live there. It's not going to be the same Russia as before. So they're asking themselves, okay, might as well just continue with our mission. So it's an ego thing now. We've got ego in the play, and the big boys are not really interested anymore. I mean, earlier and before the war, Macron was going to all the countries, was interfering. I also heard China is also going to make peace within the country. Maybe they're going in the next few days to see, okay, how they can make things better with Russia and the Ukraine war. But at the end of the day, it's a very tough proposition for everybody. I think both of them think they can win, and I think they want to see to the end.
Now, it's a bit of ego issue, just like you said, with the so-called big boys in the world. And then we're seeing African countries coming for peace missions. But at the same time, we have situations in Sudan, in Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa. Do you feel that the African countries or this African leaders, looking at the state of things and the fact that these countries, Russia and Ukraine, feel so able to handle their situations, that, you know, the African leaders should just deal with their issues and allow the Western powers deal with their own issues?
Well, I mean, the world's a global village. Everyone is going to play their part. And playing their part means that everybody's going to try and contribute to world peace, because everyone is affected by it. Now, the situation we're having with Sudan and Ethiopia, and in Sudan as well, is you have warring factions, which would destabilize a certain section of the continent. And now these things obviously send a message, because now when you see Ukraine and Russia fighting, it gives what you call it, a signal, or it gives a green light for other countries who also want to fight and say, okay, these two are fighting, might as well just go at war, to let everyone go at war. And then you see people bolstering up their defense in the process. So I think the African diplomats obviously should look inwards first. I think they should look at it, which is more realistic to solve. Because the problem is, there's a lot of interference as well with Sudan, where Western nations and Western countries have come into play to interfere into that issue, into the Sudan war, and now we want to go and interfere in the European war. I think, like I said, it's fine if that happens, but at the end of the day, we need to know that what's at stake. I think the African nations should channel all their efforts into fixing what's wrong in Africa at first. I think they can do that. It's an easier proposition because this is within Sudan. It's not two different countries. So I think it's easier proposition than going all the way there. I mean, they don't lose anything from even actually attempting to go to Ukraine and Russia and speaking to both parties. They wouldn't lose anything. You get maybe travel expenses and whatnot, but nothing significant. So I think they should also try and prioritize what's going on in Africa, and then we'll see where that leads to in the next few months.
All right, thank you so much, Opeoluwa, for joining us at NC Continental Prime. We wait to see how it pans out. Thank you.
Thank you.